All the question types that we've looked at so far have used a single answer to a question. So the answer is just a number, an interval, a graph, one of those cases. But obviously it's very common that we would want questions to have multiple answers, a part A, a part B. Parts A and B could be the same type of answer. They could both be numbers. One might be a function, one might be a number, so we might have different question types. Once we get into that, where we have students entering more than one answer, then we need to select question type multipart. And we need to define the answer types. So we need to think about our problem, whether we, map that out, type it up, whatever we do, but think about what the different answers are going to be in sequential order, and then create an array where we indicate each question type in order. So for instance, if the first answer was going to be just a number, we would put in number, or if we wanted a calculated number, we would put in calculated, and then we would put a comma, and then in the next set of quotation marks, we would put in the next type of answer we want. So if part B is going to be multiple choice, we would put choices, and we would continue to separate those with commas. So if we put in number, that means our answer is going to be a number type. If we put in calculated, that means our answer is going to be a calculated number. If we put in choices, that means we're creating a multiple choice type question for that portion. If we type in numfunc, that means that part of the answer will be a function. If we include draw, then that portion of the answer will be a drawing type question. If we put calc in tuple, then that will be a calculated in tuple. And if we put calc interval, then that answer will be a calculated interval. And I don't need those quotes around this. So we need to know sort of those shorthand notations that reference those different types of answers we've looked at so far. So in this case, we're going to create this with a calculated answer, a numfunc answer, and let's go with a calculated in tuple answer. So the question that I'm about to create is going to have 3 different answers, and we need to think about setting our options correctly for each of those answers. We'll see what that means as we continue typing this. Since we have 3 different question types in this multi-part question, we need to index our answers, starting with 0. So in a set of square brackets, we would set answer 0 equal to whatever calculated number we want to generate. Just for sake of demonstration, we're going to put a 3 here. Then we would need to define answer 1. So this is our numfunc answer, our function. Let's say this is x plus 3. And answer 2, which is the third item in that array for answer types, is a calculated in tuple. So let's have this be the coordinate point 0, 3. So assuming we found the y-intercept for an equation, we typed the equation. Let's actually go ahead and include that. Y equals x plus 3. And we typed out the y-intercept for that equation. With each of these different question types, we've talked about answer formatting and answer options that we can include. We can still include those here, but we need to make sure that we're assigning those options to the correct answer. So for instance, if I included the statement require decimals equals R2, that means I would want answers rounded to 2 decimal places as needed, but we don't have to include trailing zeros. But the way I've typed this, that require decimal statement would apply to every single answer in the problem. If I only want that to apply to just the first value, then I would index that require decimal statement, so I'm only requiring that first answer to be rounded. We might want that required decimal statement to apply to more than one place in our question, but unless we want it to apply everywhere, we have to add that indexing. For instance, for answer 1, we need answer format equals equation. But we don't want all of the answers to be an equation, only answer 1, which is the second answer. It's indexed as item 1. So we need to include that indexing on that answer format so that MyOpenMath is only expecting our second answer to be an equation. The first answer is just a number, third answer is a coordinate pair. So that indexing is going to be important for our answers. And then once we get ready to create our question text, we also need to use that indexing for each of our answer boxes. So if item A is answer box 0, that's where that answer of 3 is going to be expected. Part B would be the equation that we created, and part C would be that coordinate pair. Now we can demo this question and we can look at entering these different answers. Something to note is that by default, when you have a multi-part question, MyOpenMath will allow students to answer questions part by part. Oh, and actually, look, I've got an error in here. That's a good thing to catch. So I have y equals x plus 3 in answer 1, but I never defined my variables. So my variables are going to be x and y for this problem, since I'm including more than just an x variable. Now we can go back and answer question 3, and that error has disappeared. What I was mentioning a minute ago, though, is that MyOpenMath will allow you to answer question by question, and it will evaluate whether you got that portion of the question correct before you go on to tackle part B. So we can check our answer to part B and check our answer to part C. If you don't want students to have that option, then what you can do is add an additional formatting statement here, which is score method. And you can change this to, or you can add the option single score. Now if we load that question again, students have to complete that question. And if they haven't answered all of the different fields, all of the fields that they've left blank will be marked wrong. So we just used up one of our attempts on parts B and part C. Obviously we can still try to answer it, but the only question that was marked as correct was part A. Versus without that single score method, I get 3 chances, let's say, whatever we set in our answer, our assignment settings. I can tackle question A 3 times without using up any attempts on parts B or part C. So the single score option just dictates whether a student has to complete the entire question all at once. And another option that we can add here is answer weights. Here we create an array and we can dictate what portion of the what fraction of the total points for the problem each question gets. Let's say, for instance, that we think part B is the most important portion of this question. We could set the first answer to carry a weight of 20% of the total points. Part B to carry a weight of 60% of the total points. And part C to carry 20% of the total points. Obviously that's an option, we don't have to include that, but if we want to weight the individual question parts differently, we have that option. We just need to make sure that those all sum to 1 or 100%. And we can see that reflected once we start entering our points or entering solutions. That now we're getting 0.2 points, 0.6 points, because right now this question is only out of 1 point. When you create a homework assignment, you can go in, you can change the point value. So if you wanted this question to be worth 10 points, part A is still worth 20% of those 10 points, and so on. A key item to pay attention to with these multi-part questions is making sure that your answer types have the right number of question types listed in the correct order. So if you change the order of this array, then your answers below need to be reordered as well. Because we're indexing this, answer 0 applies to that first question type in that array. So if you come back to revise a question or you're editing a question someone else has created, just making sure you're paying attention to these answer types, the order that's listed, and the indexing for those questions. We can always come back and add and change things, which is great, but we just need to make modifications to some of those indices if we're adding additional portions or rearranging portions of a question.